Hold on. Okay. So Jan is from Port Angeles. For those of you who are not in Washington or who can't remember where Port Angeles is, here's a little map where Google put the little red dot right over the word Port Angeles. And you see, it's really not that far from Seattle. You can get a lot farther away from Seattle and still be in the state of Washington. So it's up on the corner. Port Angeles, so she's in this little studio here there. She's behind the glass door in the middle, and a wonderful little spot right downtown. And the wonderful thing about Port Angeles is that you can walk around a building and look up, and this will be staring you in the face. I'm always surprised when the Olympics pop out. And if you turn around and look the other way, you look across and see Victoria, which is kind of amazing. So it's a great town. I encourage you to go out there. There is a wonderful art center. The Port Angeles Fine Arts Center has a gorgeous courtyard. They have an outdoor sculpture garden, which I think is the first thing I ever explored out there because I love art in the wild. So I encourage you to take a trip out to Port Angeles and see it. And you can call up Jan and have tea. I'm inviting you for her. This is Jan's book. This is she gave a presentation at our show and tell. So this is to remind you, she built this little mailbox, and for the postcards that she did in exchange, it's a fabulous piece of structure, and she has a little video on her website. So if you want to see it more, I really recommend it. It's great. So I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to spotlight Jan and let her go.
Hi, everybody. Hi, it's good to see so many people. I want to thank you, Celine, and the Book Arts Guild for giving me this chance to share one of my latest books with people who are interested in it. And I want to thank you for actually showing up. I'm sure that the Committee for the Congress of the United States didn't consult our schedule for their schedule, so we have a little bit of cross current tonight. It reminds me of a story that actually happened to me when I was much younger. I was busking on this Embarcadero in San Francisco, and by busking I mean I was a belly dancer and I was dancing with a snake. And I never lost an audience when I had a snake. And this particular day, I'm dancing and I'm getting ready to bring out the snake. And the only thing that has ever upstaged me was the Stanford Marching Band. I didn't even get a chance to pass the hat. So something from my past. But right now, I would like to talk about my latest book, which I call Flight Data. And I want to share with you how it came about in my mind. The first thing that happened was many years ago, I was in Northern California and I wanted to climb Mount Lassen. It's a beautiful volcano in the northwest corner of the state. And I got there, the road takes you about halfway up the mountain, and then that's where you start to climb. And I noticed that it was morning and the sun was starting to warm the rocks, and the warm rocks were heating the air, and the heated air started to rise. And as it rose, there were myriads of little butterflies caught on the waves, and they were carried up to the top of the volcano. Well, I was a little worried for these butterflies because there's not much up on the top of the volcano for them to eat or drink. And I started walking up the volcano myself. And when I got there, without the help of warming, rising air, I puff, puff, puff. I got up there and I saw those butterflies fluttering around the caldera of the volcano. So I enjoyed it a few hours up there and walked around the caldera and kept noticing the butterflies. And as the afternoon came on and the air started cooling, it of course started falling. And as it did, the butterflies came down on the cooling air, down to where I had seen them first. And of course they were hungry, so they got busy. But I took that story and I put it in my mental storeroom back there. Another story that is a source for the book that I created, Flight Data, is about this time last year, I went up to Hurricane Ridge. There was still a little snow left. And as I was driving up the highway, up the Hurricane Ridge Highway, I noticed in places on the highway, you know how they blast out the road when they're building the road to make it more efficient to get up. And so they create these slopes that come down to the road at a rather steep angle. And the slopes are usually solid rock, or they have lots of little rocks on them. And as I went by one of these, I noticed big fluffs of white blossoms in the scree, in the rocks. And I looked around and there was these little plants were everywhere, just being real happy, living right there. And I thought, those are really beautiful. So I took out my camera and I started taking some photos that I call courage and determination. A little while later, I started to sweat a little blood and I started writing. I don't consider myself a writer. If I were really a writer, I would be having the discipline to do it every day, like my writer friends do. But I don't. I just start writing when I need to. And anyway, I started writing, and I was writing from a time in life when you look back to see the story you've been writing. And analogies came into my story that I was writing. This analogy of the rise and the fall, an arc of a life, times of struggle and times in the sun. I then began gathering more photos from my past and going out and finding photos about dualities that seemed to comment on the writing I was doing. Some of those dualities were beginning, end, urgency, release, threshold, summation, alpha, omega. And each little duality and the photos that wound up going with them turned into a little sub-story that became part of my book. And in the sub-story, I give the first and last pages, and the viewer can choose to fill in the sub-story or not. That's part of the book. I would like to show you a short video now that I made to present this. And to do that, I need to press this button right here, share screen. And it's about a 2-minute video. And I feel it really important that artists' books be interacted with. So this is the best I can do to give you interaction when you really can't touch it. But here we go. So I'm going to share this. And here it is. And I'm assuming you can see it. And I'm going to play it for you.
Flight data. Sun warms rock, heats air, lifts a cumulus of butterflies up sleeping volcano to a caldera, slow swirl of untroubled aspiration. Evening air cools Lepidoptera in descent, feather gentle, falling on frayed wings back to the pinpoint called summation and the hunger search. You and I, my friend, sputter, scrape, and tumble all heads and tails in recapitulation. Let us venerate both rise and decline. Let us endure. Let us glide dogged down past intrepid vegetation, past enduring rock, past secret crevices, back to blue-eyed jackdaws closing speech. There is no other way to go.
So that's a short video that shows how the book works. Now, there were two things that people usually ask me. That people when they read the poem or they hear the poem, they ask me, what is stochastic? And I should have been nicer, gentler, and changed the word and made it, more understandable. But I like the sound of that word, stochastic. And what it means is random and unpredictable, that the morning can be random and unpredictable was the point of that one picture. The other thing they asked me is, what is a jackdaw? And I didn't know, I was just writing it and the word jackdaw came up and I thought I must have seen that somewhere. And so I went online and I checked it out, and a jackdaw is a European COVID. It doesn't look like our crows. It has a light gray and dark gray coat. And when I looked at the pictures, the jackdaw just reminded me of somebody in a suit of a undertaker or a barrister. So I knew that the jackdaw had to be in my poem. Please, as we go on, if you have questions, I'm going to ask you to put them in the chat box. And we're going to have plenty of time for discussion at the end of this presentation. Questions can be about my particular inspirations, the mechanics of construction, the phenomenon of artist books, but I do ask you, don't ask me about the meaning of art and life. We did that when we were students and it took too much red wine. So why is this presentation called Subverting the Two-Dimensional? Actually, Celine was responsible for that. But specifically, there are a couple of reasons. I put it in my description because the Jacob Ladders stories are flat photos. They're two-dimensional. But when you activate them, they are no longer 2D, but full of magic. And the children recognize that magic. When I took this book to the art center to present it to children to talk about artist books, they just went crazy over these Jacob's Ladders. And one boy came back to me after he had he still had it in his hand, and he said, "Miss Dove, this is not logical." And I just said, yeah, you're right. It's not logical. And I just felt so happy for that boy. But in general, I use the title Subverting the Two-Dimensional. I like the word subverting because of my bad attitude toward my academic indoctrination. Don't get me wrong. I do and did enjoy learning very much. But other messages I have been trying to unlearn from my academic past are: follow the rules, don't question authority, abandon your personal circular self for the linear practical. And that's part of what my books are about. And the final reason is my feeling that good artist books are miracles. So with that in mind, I want to move on and start talking about the actual, did I miss something here? Yeah, I got to show the keynote. Okay, so I'm going to share screen again, and I'm going to put it on. Oh, don't tell me no, don't tell me this.
Take a breath. You
Yeah,
did it before. You know it's there.
We can do it again. I think I put it away.
Oh, of course.
No, here it is.
Okay, good.
But it's not showing on my screen. So I'm going to unshare and I'm going to try it again. Oh, I have to activate it. So, okay, I'm activating it and I'm going to share.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so it's the making of the story about the making of flight data. Now, in what I want to share with you is that okay, go. It worked before. Shift. Help. It's not escape. It's
Is
stuff.
it's your slideshow isn't working?
Yeah.
Usually you just click a mouse or click your space bar
I'm
or
clicking.
click the
There it is.
right
Okay,
arrow.
there it
There
is.
we go.
Okay. Okay, so this shows the book opened up. And the first part of the book to think about is that it's a black box. This is about flight data, and flight data is usually kept in a black box. And that is from my understanding that the form of an artist book is related to and amplifies the content of the book. That's something I learned way back in the Chicago Art Institute, and it has helped me a lot since then. The second part of the book is this booklet. And there we go. The booklet, this construction is just simply this simple accordion construction. It's printed on my printer on Cancian rag photography paper, but it's covered with some paper that we call paste paper. And if you haven't done paste paper, oh, you have to. It is such a blast. I call it finger painting for adults. And what you do is you take colored pigment of some kind and you put it in a wheat paste and you slop it on the paper and you move it around any way you can think to do it. And there's just so much that you can do with it, and it's surprising in so many ways. I love doing it. And that paper I just folded. You see, I put some in the cover of the book, but I've just folded the paper to make a nice, tight, strong cover for the little accordion fold booklet. Now, the third part of the book are the actual Jacob's ladders. So, and that's where I'm going to concentrate the energy of this presentation. The Jacob's ladders need a little bit of weight to work. So I cut up some standard acid-free mat board, and I was upcycled, and I cut them into 3.5 by 5-inch rectangles. Then I went to Photoshop, and in Photoshop, I worked on the layouts for the printing. I worked on taking the photographs and dividing them up. How are they going to get divided up? And where were they going to be divided? How is the composition going to work? How is the color? How are they going to relate to each other color-wise? And also the text, if I was going to use text or not, and if I was going to use it, where was I going to put it? And Photoshop is great for just working through stuff and making decisions and testing. It's one of my favorite tools. Now, once I got the file the way I wanted, I printed it out on my Epson 9900 printer. This is right in my studio. And I joke that this is the same printer you have on your desktop, only it's bigger. And it uses what they call archival inks. It's actually pigment inks, and they say they're archival, but it's like a watercolor. Even a very good watercolor, if you expose it to sunlight or ultraviolet, it will fade. And it's the same with these pigments. If you put them somewhere where they don't receive direct sunlight, they'll last a long time. I have prints that I printed over 10 years ago and they're still fresh and new, but they're not in direct sun. These prints, they say archival, but I don't think it's for the ages. It will, however, outlast me. Then once it comes out of the printer, I have to start thinking about how these pages are going to be used and are they going to get damaged. Now, in a normal 2D print, it's dry to the touch when it comes out of the printer and you let it gas off, but it's okay to move it around. Now, but an artist book is going to have comparatively rough handling. So I use a good fixative on it first. I think I was using Sennelier here. Then next, and some people don't know about this, I wanted to really put a really good heavy coat on the pigment part of on the pictures so they wouldn't get dented and scratched up. So I use this wax and resin shield. It's called Dorland's, and I wasn't aware of it because I'm not too much of a painter, but painters use it. They put it in their paints. It's a medium for the paint. Some watercolorists put it over their watercolors. You don't even know that it's there, but it's protecting the watercolor. I put it on top of my print, and I found that it makes the dark colors even deeper, and I really love that, but it doesn't mess around with the medium and lighter values of the colors. And then I found out that it also makes it a little bit more possible to remove glue splotches if you tend to get them on the pigment, which when it comes to glue splotches, I'm the world champion. So how do we put this on? I'm going to show you. Like Mr. Miyagi would say, wax on, wax off. And you just put the wax on there and get a good coat on, and then you buff it off just like polishing a car. Makes it really strong, and you hardly even know it's there. I had to continue on in the process now that I've got the protection on the images, and I separated the rectangles separate from each other. Now I had to be very careful because you see, as I was working them in Photoshop, I put the numbers of where they came in the succession next to the picture. I couldn't print them on the back. So as I cut these up, I have to transfer the numbers to the back of the image so I can keep, so I don't have to reorder these, set them in order again every time. On this one, I'm cutting with a scalpel. The scalpels make really tight cuts, as you might expect, but you got to be careful with the scalpel because if you put too much pressure on it, it'll bend and it'll give you a wavy line. And also notice the clamp. A friend of mine is a woodworker, and when he saw me trying to cut and the ruler slipped, he said, "Let me show you something. And if you clamp it down, preferably at both ends, if you have a long enough straight edge, it's not going to slip and you're going to get a real good cut." So after you see that I got a very clean line there, and but I did lie. I told you that I made the squares 5 inches by 3.5 inches. Well, actually, they're a little bit bigger because I'm going to be trimming these a couple more times, and I have to wait till the very end to make sure that everything is exactly the same size. So they're a little bit more than 5 inches by 3.5 inches for cosmetic reasons. Now here's a picture. That's how I transferred the colors, the numbers to the back of the prints. And you have to kind of look through the paper to see if you're getting it in the right place. Most of the most of these toys that I have seen, most of the Jacob's ladders, they've been brightly colored woodblock toys, and they have designs set into the individual pieces. But for this project, sequence is everything. I want to reproduce that photograph, and I want to make the image unified down the whole gadget. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Here's a picture that was sent to me by my friend Mary Alice Bolter, and it is a Jacob's ladder that I made for a party favor, and it's chocolates, and it's wrapped, each chocolate is wrapped in paste paper, and you see I didn't have to really worry about what the succession of color was going to be on there. So it was fairly easy to make. There was no requirements as to order. But sequence and order are everything in other pages. Like if I want to, this is a little Jacob's ladder that I made for another artist book that I made, which was a book of little puzzles. intellectual bonbons. And you see that there's the Jacob's ladder, and there's the saint's head and his hands and his feet, and everything is the right order. But when I run it, oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 I pressed the wrong button. How do I get this back? Play. Okay, when I press the button, there it goes. And what's on the other side? There's supposed to be a bird there. It works this way, but it doesn't work this way. What went wrong? Well, what went wrong is that the starling in this picture, he's on his head, and he's cut up from his feet. So obviously my ordering and succession wasn't right on here. So I thought, oh, don't show that to them. And then I thought, no, show this as a cautionary tale of what'll happen if you don't number everything and pay attention. But I want to also tell you that nothing in art is lost. So let's go to the next one. And this is the book that I made many years ago that has the little puzzles in it. And this little book was here. And the students in the video production class at Berkeley City College were given the assignment to do a demo video for me of this book. And I told them what I wanted them to do was just really to play with all these puzzles, because it's a book about curiosity and playing, and how creativity at roots comes from curiosity and playing. So there was a puppeteer in the group, and he took my Jacob's ladder here, and this is what he did with it. So it didn't matter if things weren't in order. And if you go online, you'll see that lots of people use Jacob's ladders, not for the purposes I'm using them for, but for telling stories. They turn the shapes of the Jacob's ladder into little animals, and they narrate stories while they're playing with the Jacob's ladder. Now I'm going to get back to what I was doing. I was trimming. So here I was trimming with a scalpel, but here's another way to trim. I trimmed with my paper cutting tool, which is a very nice one, a very, very sharp blade, and it's all square. And if I spend the time while I'm working in Photoshop and really get those lines lined up, I don't have to cut each rectangle individually. I can just make a slice and cut 6 ends off at once. So that's another way to trim if you're very careful. Now I've taken the photos apart. Each one is in 6 sections, but it's still 2D. And we're coming to the place where the magic, we start to build in the magic. I click the right thing. And now here's the boards that I used to back each of the sections of the photograph. And you see that improbable summation has an F on the back, and the board has an F, and I'm going to sandwich them together with the F of the board showing, so I don't lose track. It's really makes my stomach ache to think about it. I'm going to use some PVA, polyvinyl acetate glue, which is non-acidic and is a glue we use in bookbinding a lot. And I'm gonna roll that onto the back of the board. Now, the way I learned to put glue on a board was to lay it down on newsprint, use the brush the glue very smoothly all the way off onto the paper. But that procedure leaves little scraps of paper with wet glue on them. And as I say, I am the world's worst for getting wet glue in the wrong place. So I decided to do it this way, and it works really well for me. That roller just goes to the edge. And once I have all the glue all the way to the smoothly all the way to the edges, I gently but firmly lay my A down on top of my A. And if there's any squish out glue, I carefully take that off. And once all of these sections are done, I call them cards now, I interleave them with wax paper. And then I wrap them, there's 6 of them together in the wax paper real tightly, like you're wrapping a baby. And the reason I do that is because if I put this in the press with this layer here and the layer behind it tilted off, the press would push down on this layer and make an embossing on the image underneath it. So I wrap everything really tight and I push in from the edges so that everything is lined up before I put them in the press. And here's my press. I've got my 2 photographs, 6 each, and I've got them wrapped them really tightly, and they're all in a very good, very tight stack. And I put them in the press and I let it dry under pressure. I want to take careful to avoid any potential arching or buckling of these cards. And usually that takes overnight to dry. So while it's drying, I think about the handles. Remember in the preview, you saw that the person using the book was holding the handles and they looked like they were part of the picture. I hope they did anyway. So what I did, how did I make these? I took some slotted hardwood clothespins and I started carving them down. I actually got the idea from seeing an antique Jacob's ladder on the online somewhere, a soldier, I think, and you tilted it with the handle. Anyway, I am favored to work, to have a studio with a woodworker, so I have access to his woodworking tools. This sandpaper is 50 grit and it's like rocks on paper, and it takes things off really, really fast. It's going so fast you can't see that grain. And it could also give you a very bloody manicure if you're not very careful. So I have much respect for these power instruments. I follow the rough sanding with some hand sanding because my woodworking friend tells me that when you put water on wood, it raises the grain, and I'm going to be using a water-based paint to paint these pieces of wood. So I smooth them down as much as I can with a maybe 120, 180 grit sandpaper to try to keep it from raising the grain too much, because I'm not going to be using gesso. And now I went backwards. Oh, and now the books came out of the press. Yeah. I take the back images and I release them from their tight wraps. And I do the last trim. And you see, I might take off that little of the edge, but I have to because they all have to be the same width and length. Wonderful tool, this paper cutter. Once I get everything trimmed to the same size, then I have to mark the backs of each of these cards with some lines because half of the cards are going to have glued lace on them. So I'm going to mark the lace here, right? And I'm going to make the lines that show where the lace go. I can do that individually for each block and have to mark each block and draw the lines on each block. And it takes a long time. Or my woodworking friend showed me, I can put down a straight edge. I can push everything that is going to be marked up to the straight edge, and using a ruler that's not going to slip because I've clamped it, I can draw the line all the way through all of the cards. And you'll see in a minute what that looks like. So here you see the lines that they look like they're in every other card. And there's a reason for that, but we'll move on. The next thing I have to do is I need to cut 3 lengths of the ribbon, and each length is going to be twice as long as the length of the 6 cards. And I cut the, here I show you how the cards are in their sequence. All the cards that are going to have lace glued to them are here, and they are in the sequence A, 2, C, 4, 6, E. And the ones that are going to be just glued all over the back are 1, B, 3, D, 5, and F. And so I tell you, this becomes a real adventure when you get to this part of the project. So here I have the first board A, and I glue 2 pieces of the lace facing to the right. Next, I glue another piece of the lacing, the 3rd piece of lacing, facing to the left. And this is the secret of why the toy is going to work. Okay, one of the ribbons is facing left. Now what I have to do is I have to put glue in between the ribbon and the edge of the board. And that is because you don't want the height of the ribbon to cause problems with your gluing. And you may think that's silly. That is the thinnest ribbon in the world, but it really, you have to put the extra glue in here. And I'll show you what you want to happen in the next. You've got to put the extra glue in there. And now here's the board that's going to cover it on the top. This was A, and this one is 1. And you want plenty of glue on there, but not too much. And how to get to that point where you know how much is plenty and how much is not too much? Well, they call it practice, practice, practice. Now, where any glue squishes out, I wipe it up. But again, I have to be careful to avoid getting pigment on, or to avoid getting glue on the pigment side of the card. Finally, I take that card and I cover it with some wax paper and I pressurize it. And they say, and you might say, well, why don't you just put it back in the press? Well, I could. That's not going to make a whole lot of difference with the first layer. But when I start weaving this ribbon back and forth and putting images on top of that ribbon, the pressure of the press is considerably more than the pressure of a brick. And the ribbon, I found, will emboss the image. So I don't want that to happen. I don't want the ribbon pattern embossed on my next card. So I just put a slight amount of weight on it and just hold it there until the glue starts to dry. And the magic now begins to start. I'm going to do the second layer, and now I have to change the direction of the ribbons. So those that were facing right are now going to face left. And you want to be careful because the next thing you're going to do is here I switched the directions of the ribbon, but I didn't put any glue. And this is really important because I didn't follow that direction one time, and I'll tell you what happened. Do not add glue here, or as they say, you will make a very nice coaster. And that's what I did for my first project. That was the project before the Starling. So you see, this has been a long learning process for me. Let's move on. And now that I've got the ribbon switched, no glue, I take the second piece, that's either 2 or B, I'm not sure, and I line it up. I check to see that they are, the top here is connected to the bottom here. If I get them wrong, it's probably not going to look like much in this example, but if you flip the picture down, the picture comes out, you will see that one of them is upside down. So I remind you of the cautionary starling, and it will be cut up and singing on its head again if you don't get this right. I take a deep breath and I lay that card down, the second section of cards down on the first section of cards. And I'm going to repeat the gluing process. Remember, I filled in some glue to account for the height of the ribbon. And then I added more glue on the B section, and that's going to lay down on top of the 2 section. Again, much glue, but not too much. Again, I align, I turn it over. one section onto the other. I line them carefully and I wipe away any excess glue also carefully. Now, once that's done, I'm going to weight it down again. And I have to wait for that to dry. When it's dry, I am going to flip the ribbon again. Do you see a pattern? Something is being repeated. I'm not going to bore you with tedious pictures of the process where I just kept repeating the same pattern until all the cards were used up, but that's what I do. I just keep repeating the pattern until all the cards are used up, except in the last layer, in the layer 6, before I glue the top on, I have to cut off the excess ribbon so that it won't hang out the edge and be ugly. And finally, the ribbon's cut and I've finished gluing, and I wrap it up nice and tight. I swaddle it in wax paper, make sure everything is sitting one right on top of the other, and weight it, and it's gonna wait overnight. And if my images are not squared to each other, oh, well, there's no taking it apart and doing it again. You start over. Okay, and I did. Believe me, I've done this a few times. Now we're going to go on to the finishing it up. It's all glued and squared and tight and polite, and I say, I need to put the handles on. So if you can see in the picture, I made a mark halfway on either side of the top part of the image. And I took my Burin, my etching burnisher, and I pushed down really hard to crush the mat board so that it's a little thinner there, and that's going to make it a little easier to ease the clothespins into place. Now in the next picture, you'll see that I have to start painting the clothespins, and I try to camouflage them pretty much to the colors that will be in the picture. And at this stage, I'm not getting any detail, but I have to be careful that I can blend the front color, which in this case is bluish and whites, and the back color, which is blackish and greens. So I really need to fudge that line. I don't want it to show. Finally, and I get those in place, and I make sure they stay in place because I just put some glue in the slots, and I have to get them in line and straight and in the center before the glue dries, or I ruin the whole thing. So the handles are in place, and I then begin to work the details so that it actually looks like my goal is that it looks like the pins are part of the painting. And why I wanted to do that, I don't know, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So if you wanted a lesson on how to make this toy, there may not be enough information in this lesson for you, but it is correct except where noted. And if you are very patient, you possibly could reproduce this item. But if you, like me, need more help, there may just be a class in sequential Jacob's ladders coming up in your near future. Stranger things have happened. So if you have any questions or comments, let's see what's in the chat room.
I don't think any questions came in while we were chat or watching, but I have a couple of questions. I just want to say first, thank you. It was a great mix of both the theory behind the piece or the thinking behind the piece, and then also the practical of what to put, how to do it, and what to put together. And so my questions kind of cross both of those lines. So I see here Pat says, and this is one of the questions I have: what brand is your cutter? Because you raved about it, but then you didn't say what kind it was. I've never seen one like that.
It's a very nice one. I could cut mat board with it too. I can go get the name of it for you, but all I can tell you is it was expensive.
It was beautiful. It looked very precise.
It is very precise, and it sharpens itself as you cut.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a
Bonnie
doll
says it's
cutter.
a
It might be.
dolly.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think it sounds right because I know I look at
German.
doll cutters. Yeah.
Cool. So I want to go back. Well, to go back to the very, very beginning, I think that a very interesting Jacob's ladder might be one with you dancing on one side and the snake on the other side. Don't you think that a Jacob's ladder dancing Jan with the snake? I think that could be very effective. I just throw it out there as a possible.
I'll tell you, it's probably not going to happen.
And where is that snake today?
Oh, he has gone on to a happier life, I'm sure.
So I want to go back to you called this book Flight Data, and you wanted to make it a black box to reflect the idea of the black box holds the flight data. But I didn't understand, where did the name Flight Data come from? How does that relate to the book?
Because it's about the butterflies, the rising and the flight and the falling. And also in the Jacob's ladders, they're all about that kind of rise and fall, about beginning and end, and about urgency, like in youth, and then, just giving off the information at the end. It's all that kind of image of flight. Now, I know that the competition or the show at PSBA this time was about rise and fall, I think, wasn't it? I can't remember what the exact, I never.
Valleys and hills, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Peaks
And
and
I can
valleys.
never, it was
peaks and valleys, there you go.
valleys, and I can never work according to a plan, but this just happened to fit in. So I was real happy that it fit, that it helped solidify my ideas of the rising.
And it really worked well. I really liked how when you would, in the video, you could see how you switched, and my compliments on the function of your Jacob's ladder. Those are very hard to get them to work that smoothly, but it was just so cool watching the one color change into the other color. And the pictures were they were the right pictures to put in that shape, because you have the waterfall or the unfolding fern. And now I see what you say when you're talking about the starting and the ending. That's very evocative of that description, the starting and the ending. That's very cool. So on the practical side, and if anybody has a question, just shout it out. So on the you mentioned the lace or the ribbon that you used between the boards. I mean, the thing that makes it function, I guess. I don't know what part of that book. Anyway, what was it? It looked like it was silk ribbon, but you called it lace.
It's a nylon. It was a nylon ribbon I got online. And I got it because it was as transparent as I could find. You saw in the little sample I made of little Saint Joseph and the poor bird, that I made it out of acetate ribbon, and the opacity of the color just really kind of blocked the image. So I wanted it a little more transparent. So I
hadn't seen that ribbon before. And did you find it tougher too? Like it held up to being a hinge?
No, the polyester ribbons you get are really tough. I haven't had any problem with them for other applications. So
I like those.
Yeah, it worked well.
And now you had I get, would you consider the words that were on each picture, were those a title of the photo? Or was that a line from the poem? Or
well, they could be that. What I consider them is each side of the Jacob's ladder. One side is the beginning of the book, and the other side is the end of the book. And I was hoping that people would be interested in taking the words from the first page and the words from the last page and filling in their own words in the middle. That's my intended function for them in the book.
So can you tell us, so just, I see it's there behind you. So tell me the starting words and ending words on one of them.
This one is aspire. There's my popcorn plant. And so the popcorn plant aspires. And this one is wrong way. Surrender. So we start the beginning of life and we, are building families and we are buying houses and we're trying to get our PhDs and we're doing all this stuff to make ourselves bigger. And then we get to a point where we can just relax and just surrender to what life is. And that's kind of my thinking on what this is about, but it doesn't have to be the viewer's thinking. It can, the viewer can say whatever they want in there because it's their interpretation of the book. And that to me is what artist books are about.
Right, because I could also see that you would start with surrender and move to aspire, that by surrendering, you can aspire to things too. So
Yeah, exactly.
you can tell the story however you want it.
That's right.
Lovely, lovely. I love your images. And I know just from knowing a little bit about your work, do you always start with a photo?
No, most of my work starts with figure drawing. I like to draw the figure.
Mhm.
And we used to have a figure drawing group up here in Port Angeles. It's since closed down and I'm hoping we can establish another one. But I go in with my computer and you can take one of these things and a pad and you just draw directly into the computer. And I tend to draw in a very linear fashion. And so the lines that I draw, I can put on different layers in Photoshop. And then when I get all finished, since as I tell people, my idea about drawing is that the drawing is it's a record of your search for form. So if that's what it is, then I don't have to be worried about making a reproduction of that figure. I can make a reproduction of that figure, but it's not that interesting. But I can take those lines and I can take some out and I can make some bigger and I can change their positions in Photoshop and start creating new images. And that's the way I usually start with an artist book. The book that I'm working on now is combining my drawings, my figure drawings, and some photographs that I've been working on. So
that's why I thought you started with the photos. So they're very layered, almost collagey with the drawing and the background pieces. So, but you're actually normally starting with your drawing and not the photo. Interesting.
Doesn't have to be that way though. I do them any way they come. I'm glad to have them.
Yeah, I love them. They're so ethereal looking. The way when you get all those different layers, the different. I don't know. I love your layers of painting or whatever you call it, imagery. Your layers of imagery.
5 layers of imagery. Yeah. I see some that somebody asked me how tight I pulled them. Dorothy asked how snug to pull the ribbons. Pretty snug, but not tight, because if you do it tight, the little pages won't flip. But if it's too loose, then everything is all wobbly. So again, practice, practice, practice.
So did you make a full mock-up of this before building it with all the same weight papers and everything?
Yeah. Well, what happened was I started building it. I was working on it last year, and the Christmas show came up at the art center, and I thought, these are pretty nice. I bet the kids will like it. So I made a bunch of them on that same format, but different photographs. And I didn't put any words on them. And that practice is what helped me make them for the book. So, and some people got some nice Jacob's ladders for Christmas presents.
I like those ones with the handles. I've never seen that form before, but it makes them really very functional. And then they sit really nicely in the box too. That keeps them from being just kind of all loosey-goosey. That's
right. I noticed when I made the puzzle book that I had put on the side of the Jacob's ladder on the top piece, I had put 2 dots where you put your finger, but nobody ever saw the dots. So they didn't know how to make it work. So I thought, well, I need to extend those dots. And that's where the handles came in. But I did see it on an antique Jacob's ladder also.
Right, right. And the painting was gorgeous. The yellow one where I think it was tree leaves and branches, and you
Uh-huh.
painted it. It really looked like it was a piece of that photo. That one was really,
Yeah.
really effective.
That
when
was fun
painted.
to do. There was it this one? Oh, this one. You can see this, it was spring. This is the alpha. And just to paint the background of the blurred out area and draw the branch across the pin, brought it in.
Oh, yeah. So you painted the branch, the continuation of the branch
Yeah,
across
right.
your handle. Wow. Beautiful. And so now tell me what the 8 photos are. Because you said you have the puffball and the waterfall.
Well, I've got urgency, divergence, divulgence, which is this one,
Oh, the fern.
the fern. So that's the urgency of youth. And then you can't just turn it over. And then the divulgence, when the urgency is not there, but the mentoring that was learned in the time of divergence of urgency is
Beautiful colors in that photo. It really glows.
That was right here on the zigzag. There's so beautiful there in the spring. You know, the zigzag next to the organic store. This one was, this one is stochastic. I just like the idea of that entry into the sky being stochastic. You would never know when you can get there because
Yeah, how far is up?
Yeah, and then it turns into this. This was a glacier lily that I took up on top of Hurricane Ridge, and this was improbable summation.
Mm.
And then you saw alpha you saw the beginning of alpha. This is alpha. And omega, I don't know if the light is good enough to see that, is this beautiful sequoia. Redwood, what are they? Redwoods? The up on the coast, the redwoods.
Post redwood. Yeah.
That was in decay. And
Yeah.
love that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I really love the linear photos, how nicely the linear photos, they just fit the form of this so well.
Yeah, I had to find images that you could put into.
Yeah, that could be 5 inches wide and 15 inches tall. Not a common photo shape. All right, okay, and here's my last question. And this is a purely mechanical, or how you do this. You mentioned way at the beginning about the fixative, and I have tried using fixative before, and it always goes on very gobby and spitty. So I was wondering if you had a suggestion on how to make your fixative go on smooth, and is it just the brand of fixative, do you think?
Well, I use a good fixative, but if you hold it about that far away from what you're spraying, about 8-12 inches, and you spray lightly, spray quickly so that you get a light coat, and then you let it dry, and then you do it again. But I do it again from a different direction, and then let it dry, and then I do it again from a different direction.
Oh, 3 times.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But 3 very light coats so you don't get splotching.
Oh, okay, okay. So maybe I'm just trying it with too heavy of a hand. Need to go lighter. Now, I heard a little hint about a Jacob's Ladder class. Are you, is that in your future events calendar?
Yeah, I've been talking to the people at PSBA, and they think that might be a good class to have.
Oh, great.
If and when that comes up, you'll hear about it.
Okay, well, we'll share the news if it comes
And I
out.
think that when it has to be in person, I don't think I could do it online.
Boy, I don't think so, because it's very tricky to look at.
And
you just be constantly going, show me what you've done, show me what you've done.
And then I'm seeing it backwards because I'm seeing it in video.
Right. No, your other hand. All right, I'm gonna turn off, unless anybody else has any other questions, I'm gonna turn off the recording.